So, I'd like to welcome you to tonight's presentation. I'm very honoured to be presenting together with Gary, and perhaps just a couple words to how this program came to be. We've been fortunate enough to buy a building for Spiritgrow. Well, strong word, buy. We've been fortunate enough to put a down payment and take ownership of a building and work on a building campaign to pay it off just up the street. And the reason why we're buying a new building for Spiritgrow is because we're getting a bit tired of the fact that we have no windows, that we can't really do more than one program at any given time in the building, that we don't have spaces that are more purpose designed for the things that we want to do here. And so it's always been a dream to have a larger space and a more purpose-built space. Not only that, but we've always wanted to create a space that would do more than what we do already. You would have noticed when you walk into Spiritgrow, there's always a smell, there's a certain lighting scheme, there are colours. We're very deliberate about the space that we've got here. And we have done our best with the budget that we had when we began Spiritgrow. But when you drive past Spiritgrow, or even when you walk in, you wouldn't necessarily say this is a centre that is achieving everything that it wants to. While we're trying to help people feel more relaxed and more in touch with themselves, what we're not doing is actually educating about ourself in context of the world we live in. And when I talk about the world, I don't mean the social world, I mean the earth, the world, the planet that we're on. And so the future Spiritgrow building is actually about creating a space that isn't just good for the individual who comes there, but it's about educating and being a space that is good for the environment in which we will be, but also a statement about how we, people, should be behaving and responding to the environment and the earth as a whole. Why is this so important? Well, number one, it's important because, well, I'm only going to go through number one. I'm going to let Gary go through number 2, 3, 4, and 5. But number one is that as a people, there is an ancient book in our past. And it's not just a part of our past, but it's something that feeds modern prayer in Jewish tradition as well as many other traditions, Judeo-Christian traditions. And the book is called the Book of Psalms, the Book of Tehillim. And it's a collection of poems. Not just poems of rhyme, but poems with deep ideas of spirituality that poets, mystics experienced and needed to be able to put into the art form of written word. And within that poetry we find an incredible amount of reference towards nature and the relationship between the Creator, the infinite, and the world and the universe. Statements like, the Creator is able to count and knows the number of how many stars exist. Now what that means is that there is a consciousness, an awareness of how many stars there are, which means there is a deliberate number of stars, which means every star matters, every star counts. And even if a star is 10, 15 billion light years away from here, or 12 billion light years away from here, and seems to have no impact on our lives, it doesn't mean it doesn't matter. It's part of the divine design of the universe, which means it's important. Further, it says that the Creator is the one that ensures that the young raven that has no mother should have food to eat when it chirps. The raven is an example of a bird that doesn't really care for its young, and the young raven needs food. And the psalmist goes on to say that it's the Creator, the Infinite, that ensures that there is food for the young raven. There's a beautiful story of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was a mystic that lived close to 300 years ago. And he was once walking through the forest with his students. And there was a leaf blowing. And he pointed out how the leaf blew just as the wind carried it. And then the wind died down and the leaf fell. And it fell smack in a space in the forest which had a direct ray of sunlight which broke through the trees. And as he demonstrated to them, under the leaf there was a worm that was struggling in the summer heat. And just where that leaf fell was precisely where the worm was, which brought it shelter on that hot summer's day. And he said, let this be a lesson and a realization of the perfection of the orchestration of forces that makes nature what it is. Nature is not something that we should be taking for granted. If the infinite, that consciousness, that designer of it, takes it so seriously and we are a product of it, then it's not something that we should just assume is here and it's here to stay and it's here to last, but rather it's something which we are a part of. When looking at it from a Jewish spiritual point of view, there were two divine gardeners created in the very beginning, Adam and Eve. They were placed into this perfect world. And they were told, tend to it, look after it. At the time, there was no such thing as the killing of animals. And at the time, there was no such thing as consumption for pleasure. Everything was other-centered. Everything was about the balance of the ecosystem, of nature, of the spirituality. It was all one. And mankind is seen as the conscious gardener of this world. We've been placed in this beautiful garden and we have a moral responsibility to look after it. Over the last 100 years, mankind has evolved. Our knowledge has developed. And the amount of knowledge that is available to us and the amount of discovery that we have made as a people in the last 100 years surpasses all time before that put together. And we move at a rapid rate, and we've got an incredible thirst for technology and for the next big invention. And that's a good thing. That's actually a part of nature, because we are a part of nature. But being bearers of consciousness and awareness, we must take stock of the consequences of this thirst and ensure that we evolve and that we discover and that we research in a way that is actually befitting of mankind as the divine gardener, as the one that is here to tend and help look after the planet, the world that we live in. And so therefore, as a spiritual center, as an organization that believes in the holistic well-being of an individual, as a place that promotes the ideas of living a life on a spiritual value system, it would be wrong, it would be unethical. And the truth is not just of us at Spiritgrow, but in my humble opinion of the Jewish world, to be operating in a way that is not in sync with the betterment of this planet and not in sync with what is good for the environment. Now, of course, there's an ethical system of when a life is at risk versus the protection of the planet and on a hierarchy, but that's not what tonight's about. Tonight's about setting an attitude, not about looking at the exceptions to the rule. Does man come first, or does an animal come first, or a plant? Take that to an ethicist. I'm not an ethicist. I may talk about ethics, but I don't know what I'm talking about. I just read the journals and I read the articles before you did, so I present on them. I can tell you where I get it all from. But this is about creating a mindset, a frame of mind, which is, do the stars count? Do they matter to me in the same way as the spiritual force, the energy that ensures that the universe exists? Does it count to me like it does to the one that put it here? And so I have some guilt with the way this building operates, but it is what it is, and that's the ethical discussion. But our future building does not need to operate in the same way as it has until now. And really tonight is not just about looking at our future, but it's also about making changes in our attitude today so that our future is built on a change of mind for those that need the change of mind. And for those that don't need the change of mind, it's about celebrating your correct position, in my opinion. And that is that if we are to build, and we are to build monoliths, and we are to build edifices that humanity is able to build, it should be a celebration and it should be in sync with the order of the natural world, and in turn it will benefit the human. And therefore, Gary entered into our narrative. When we were sitting around with our consultants, someone recommended bringing Gary on board because we were looking at, well, how will the future Spiritgrow building be powered? And Gary's going to talk a bit about this as well as the broader subject. How will it be powered? Where are we going to get our energy from? What's going to happen to the water that we use? What are we using for air conditioning and heating and all the other things that we've become spoilt and have become a necessity in our lives? How are we going to do it in a way that doesn't damage the environment? And of course there was one voice that said, why? What does it matter? We're in Caulfield. This is like the equivalent of China or India, the amount of output that goes on just in this suburb. The cars that get driven here, what's your building going to do? And the truth is, our building does a lot. It's a community centre. Everyone that comes there learns from what is there, not just the classes that take place. And the truth is, our spiritual belief is that the world will not become a better place because everyone becomes better. The world will become a better place because there is a critical mass of people who are becoming more conscious in the way that they live. And once there is a critical mass, there is a wave. And when there is a wave, there is change. And when there is change, then everyone gets on board. And that's what we're doing. We're joining the formation of that wave. We're trying to increase the critical mass of conscious living and caring for the environment. But not because it's a fad, but because it's a wave that started at the very beginning of our belief system, the very beginning of our tradition. And therefore what I'm saying is that as a Jew, this is the discussion. This isn't just a discussion because of environmentalists. It's not a discussion for those that care about the nature. It's a discussion for us as a people with thousands of years of heritage who are part of the 21st century and a part of trailblazing going forward. This is a discussion about our spirituality. And so before I hand over to Gary, just think about that. That he knows how many stars there are. He ensures the ravens can eat, and he makes the grass grow on the mountains. The specific detail of every aspect of nature and the way the wind blows and where the rain falls and the way it does it is a perfect design. And if we get in the way, then we get to a very interesting point. If we're not in sync with it, we end up with problems. And if we are in sync with it, then we end up coexisting. Earthquakes will still happen. Hurricanes will still happen. But if we're in sync, we know where to build our cities. We know how to prepare. And it's not about building bunkers deep in the ground, but it's actually about moving with the momentum of the earth. So what does this mean in the 21st century? I'm going to give you to Gary. I'm going to let Gary explain. What does this mean with cutting-edge research? What does this mean for the building industry? And what does this mean for the future Spiritgrow building? Which I believe will be, and I say it with such, I do have pride, I believe the future Spiritgrow building, with the guidance of people like Gary and others who are part of our consultants team, will be not only the greenest building in the Jewish community, but hopefully a model for how not-for-profits and charities see their capital investments playing out within the next future, the next century that we're living in. So I'm excited that you've come to listen tonight. I'm excited that I'm a part of this, and I'm very excited that Gary has come on board with this project, and not just with the project, but also to help educate the community and share with all of us. Gary Wertheimer.
Good evening, everyone. Is this working? Are we good? Yep, fantastic. Thank you very much, Menachem. That was a great intro. Oh, hello. There we go. Yep, we're good. I suppose I'll just introduce myself very quickly and explain to you how I came to do what I do. I studied construction management. It's all sort of nuts and bolts and very much about sort of onto one project, onto the other, and at the end of your career, you can hang your boots up and say, I built that one, and I built that one, and I built that one. And that's all well and good, and it's amazing. There are incredibly talented people who do that day in, day out. But for me, I got through the course and realised it was more important for me to help transition the current market towards a more sustainable future. So, per the description, the dots and the numbers behind my name, went off and did a master's degree in the area, renewable energy and architecture, and that sort of started my whole career and went off in a very exciting direction. So, keeping our blue planet green. It's, I suppose it got me thinking, this one. How do I actually get the message across tonight? There's a whole lot in all of this. So how do we fuse it? How do we bring it all together? How do we integrate, an imperative with latest technologies to ensure that the homes and the workplaces that we inhabit on a daily basis are healthy, comfortable, and are in tune with their environment, rather than fighting the natural environment. So there was an economist, economic theorist, whose name was Manfred Max Neef, and he came to a point in his career where he realised there's something very fraught, very dangerous with traditional economic theory, whereby he saw that there was always going to be a percentage of the population who are in some sort of despair. He came up with a value system, in a sense, of what he believed was fundamental human needs and human scale development. So subsistence, all the essentials. So it's all about physical and mental health, food, shelter, work, clothes, living environments, all essential stuff. Affection. I'll just run through these, but you get the picture. Freedom, creation, whatever those pursuits are. Identity, self-esteem, the ability to grow, the ability to belong. Understanding, ability to think, interact, ponder, and participate. And this is the most critical one. Because when you have all of those and you understand the imperative at hand, you realise that actually the course that we're going on is fraught with danger. The rate at which we are using resources, is just completely unsustainable. It's a collision to, the end of humanity. Unfortunately, this is where it's all heading. So, I want to pause right now and introduce a man who I hold in high regard for multiple reasons. I think you'll understand why pretty soon. His name is none other than Morgan Freeman.
One day, we will wake up to find that the energy that powers the alarm clock came from the breeze through the trees the night before. And we will go to work that morning riding the rays of the sun. It will light our cities and power our businesses. It will warm our homes and cool our workplaces. It will reduce sources of conflict and fuel our economies. It will connect us all. It won't scar the land or poison the seas. The food we eat will be good for our bodies and good for the planet. And the weather that day won't make us worry for tomorrow. There will be more jobs and less disease. the sea level will stop rising, and species will stop dying. The question is, how do we get to that day from where we are today? All 7.3 billion of us. We start by deciding that beyond our doubts and differences, such a day truly exists. And that is something each of us can do today. We can make today the day we stop thinking that the changes required to get there are impossible and beyond us, and start realizing that they are not only possible, but what the future requires of us. We must stop turning from the warnings of science and fear and denial, and instead turn toward the solutions and partnerships we need. We can make today the day we stop pointing at each other in blame, and instead chart a new course together. We have never faced a crisis this big, but we have never had a better opportunity to solve it. We have everything we need to wake up to a different kind of world. We need our leaders to be brave and their choices to be bold. They will either remember us as the generation that destroyed its home, or the one that finally came to respect it. We have every reason in the world to act. We can't wait until tomorrow. This is our only home. You can choose today to make a world of difference.
So Morgan Freeman said it. We should all go and do it. No, the truth of the matter is, I mean, it's so alarming at the rate at which we use resources, the devastation to our rainforests, to our seas, our oceans, our air. It's really, the things we as humans do is abominable, and action is urgently required. Not today, but yesterday, quite frankly. So, in short, be the change you want in the world. Because, like we've just seen from America, you can't necessarily rely on your leaders to take you there. So the building sector, and this is really where my strengths are, rather than on the wider sustainability question. The building sector is one of the biggest polluters out of any industry. Energy, we use about 40% of the world's energy. Water, you look at, say, Melbourne, 2015-16, that particular year, we used effectively the quantum of the Sydney Harbour. So 2.5 billion gigalitres, which is just phenomenal amounts. Materials, you know, yes, there's a resurgence into sustainable timbers now, but really, you know, the amount of resources we use throughout this industry is just crazy. It's, you know, and not just that. You think about the embodied energy with materials. A lot of the stuff is transported across the globe from China or wherever else. That embodied energy is, look, again, it's huge. It's huge. Waste. If anyone saw War on Waste on ABC, it gave you a pretty good insight into what's actually happening. I don't know if anyone's seen it. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. It was phenomenal.
We've posted clips to the Spiritgrow Facebook page.
Yeah, it really tells a very scary story and sad story. I actually didn't know you couldn't recycle coffee cups. So it tells you a lot about what actually lands up in landfill. Now, we'll get onto the juicy stuff. So just a bit of sort of background here on what's going on. Our buildings throughout the last, say, 50 years, up until, say, 10, 20 years ago, you effectively had architects designing beautiful, glorious houses, mansions, apartment buildings, whatever it was, when energy was cheap. It didn't matter. You just put in bigger air conditioning systems. Simple as that. You had the equivalent of a man wearing shorts and a t-shirt in the middle of winter. The McMansion. Isn't this more beautiful? So what this demonstrates is that you don't necessarily need the McMansion to build beautiful buildings that engage with nature, that engage with their natural environment. Historically, we had vernacular architecture. It was all about architecture that was built for the place in which people lived. So, take for example, this might be Swaziland or other. You used the mud from the rivers down just by the stream, you know, the straw from the fields. It was all accessible. Igloos, Eskimos, no brainer. You know, north of Africa, arid, dry, hot. I built these sorts of structures, one next to the other, shading one another. You know, they're extremely comfortable inside. We lost all of that along the way, but there is a resurgence. Energy costs have gone up. People are more aware about, oh my God, my energy bill is twice as much as it was 5 years ago. 10 times, who knows well. Climate responsive approach, it's education. It's people like you and I coming together and going, okay, we're mindful of this thing called global warming, climate change. 97% of the world's scientists say it's real. There's 3 who get a lot more airtime than they should. You know, it's happening. You know, whether we go like that or not, it's happening. And technologies. We've got incredible technologies at our disposal, from the design processes where we can model buildings to the nth degree, whether it's facade, whether it's daylight, whether it's cross-flow ventilation strategies and computational fluid dynamics. It's all there. You couldn't do that 10, 20, 30 years ago. So these are the sorts of buildings that people are starting to think about, ones that engage with the natural environment. Timbers harvested from the local forests. Windows that are appropriately sized for the residents, so you're not losing copious amounts of heat in winter and the building isn't overheating in summer. It's basic stuff that people have known for millennia. We're just relearning it. Stone, you know, thermal mass, appropriately placed, it absorbs the heat and re-radiates at night. Eaves. You know, look around. A lot of buildings, we forgot to put eaves on for the last X number of years. There's nothing complicated about it. It's just getting the fundamentals right. 95% of my job is getting the fundamentals right. You know? This is what Tesla says is the residence of the future, where your roof tiles are made of PV panels, or solar photovoltaic panels. You've got a few pretty big batteries in your garage, and of course you've got a Tesla a battery-powered car, electric car. So who knows? It's the you know the painting isn't yet drawn. We're still figuring it all out, but. At the end of the day, there are a lot of people in this industry who care a lot, from developers to architects, town planners, urban designers, sustainability consultants, traffic engineers, the whole gamut. There are people who actually care and want to do the right thing. What we do is enable them and help navigate them on that journey. So, not to sort of puff my chest, but just to show you some of the projects that we're involved in. Huge 600-bed student accommodation buildings that's under design at the moment. This one here is an aged care facility up Tugan, I think. A childcare centre. This one is currently in design, an office building in Cremorne, which is going to be 5-star Green Star rated. So we're going all the way on that one. It's very exciting stuff. Existing building retrofits. So it's, you know, building design is wonderful, but it's only a small percentage of the actual stock that's already built. So there's a huge market there of existing buildings that we need to think about. How are they performing? What can we do to bring them up to current standards? St Kilda Lifesaving Club. Islamic Museum of Australia. So we're very multicultural. We get involved and help everyone on their journey. And they actually did incredible things, I should say. There's wonderful design outcomes in that building. Helbury, city campus, vertical schools. Apparently it's all the rage. We do a lot of multi-residential high-rises and things like that. So anyway, that's a bit of what we do. Now, the good stuff. What I thought I'd do, and I won't take too much time doing this, is run you through a series of different things that we look at as designers. And just hopefully I can spark some creative juices. So sometimes it's the simplest solutions, as I say, to an ongoing problem. You know? You keep getting nudged. What do? You put tennis balls on the horns. Bang. So initially, from the outset, you need to set your goals. You need to work out where you want to go. And Menachem has clearly set the bar very high for us, so thank you very much. Appreciate it. It's wonderful. It's a beautiful thing when you get clients who truly believe in what you do and want to go on that journey, want you to help them, take them to that ultimate panacea. Learn from end users, which is what we're going to do tonight. Going to get some feedback from you guys, because you guys inhabit this space, I assume, on a weekly, daily basis. We use, as I mentioned before, we use a lot of modelling, simulation softwares to test different outcomes. And finally, and this is the most critical thing, you can't actually work out how well you're doing unless you meter it. Unless you can actually measure it in real time, you don't know how well you're doing. So, this slide, this fascinates me every time I go to the MCG. They had a seagull problem. They didn't know what to do. They tried everything under the sun. Eventually someone said, string some wires across. How much do you think a bunch of wires cost? Anyway, there's about, I think, 9 strands of wire that go across from one side to the other. Hasn't completely solved it, but it's certainly helped reduce the amount of seagulls sitting on the MCG during play. So, you know, sometimes it's not the most technical or expensive solutions. Sometimes it's simple, well-conceived ideas that get the right outcome. We look at things like capturing and reuse of water, water-efficient landscapes. So what can you do with water? You know, comes off your roof, what are you going to do with it? We all know about putting it in a tank and then reticulating it and watering the gardens and so on, but what else can you do with it? Ventilation. You know, we're in a building with a lot of people coming in, high peak periods, don't necessarily want the air conditioning on all the time. You know, let's engage with our buildings and open them up and get some air flowing through them and up them and around them and all the rest. Get the thermal envelope right. You know, it's such simple stuff. It's some of the most basic physics, you know, heat flow. You learn it in first year of mechanical engineering, I suppose. But it's basic physics. And energy capture. This is very timely. There's a lot of, I suppose, a lot's happening in this space. We're finding more and more. In fact, I'd have to say probably 80% of the buildings we work on have a PV integration. So photovoltaics integrated into the building. And hot water systems, how are we firing that water? Energy efficient lighting. 5 years ago I used to beg clients to put LEDs in their buildings. Nowadays it's just standard. Air quality. It's real. In China. Don't worry, it's not here. It's in China. And we shouldn't. This is crazy stuff. Yes, the air quality in China is bad, but the fact that we let it get to that is really sad. Really, really sad. So, thinking about these things, like what is the air quality in our spaces? What's the environment quality? Has anyone heard of sick building syndrome? Yep. So when you're in a building that is not conducive to human occupation, there's a direct link to productivity, reductions in productivity. It's proven. It's as simple as that. Healthy buildings promote healthy people, healthy lifestyle. And VOCs, volatile organic compounds. So when you build up buildings, do they smell of paint for the next 2 months? Does that car smell good for you? Not really. Bicycle hoops. Imagine. Wouldn't that be great? Riding everywhere. Little things, simple things, engaging with our buildings. You guys can read. Innovation. What can we do differently? How can we celebrate the buildings that we inhabit? This is where I put it back to you guys, because you're the end users. I can come up with a million different ideas, but are they relevant to you? That's the question. I'd prefer you to tell me what you want in your new building and see if we can integrate it into the design. So if anyone's got any ideas about the things that they would love to see in there, I'm all ears.
Natural light.
Natural light?
We're about to turn some lights off in here. You've got about 112 globes on there.
Yep.
What for? Serious?
Well, mine, you need to see this.
In your buildings, do you use double glazing?
Absolutely. Yeah.
What was it?
I would say these days we're probably nominated single glazing with a low E coat on one building in the last year.
And another thing is on non-constructive framing. Do you use special concrete with heat protection type of fillers? I'm not sure how it's in use.
Yeah.
It used to be keramzit in the Soviet Union, of course.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's all sorts of paints which have got
I'm
interest.
not talking about paint. I'm talking about light type of concrete.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. So yeah.
With heat protection.
Yeah.
Polish.
So aerated autoclave concrete, essentially. Yeah, they're all available on the market. We do try and push fly ash, which is effectively a waste product from fossil fuel, coal-fired fossil fuel production. So we do try and push that, recycle aggregates and all that sort of thing, and absolutely we'll be pushing it here. Once you've got the structural engineer on board, there's no reason why you can't use it.
And have you pushed the government for subsidies in the area of double glazing for something closer?
For what, sir?
For pushing double glazing in existing constructions? Because what I understood, the cost is prohibited for many customers.
It's expensive. Yep. There are currently no grants for double glazing residences, retrofitting double glazing as far as I'm aware. Yeah, it's a problem. It's a huge problem. Yep.
no grounds for that. But today, just today, I had installed double glazed window at home, one, just because I have a very efficient air conditioning with a compressor outside. It's quite loud. It was leaking, the sound was leaking quite badly through the window. This 3mm single glaze which was constructed 30 years ago. We put double glazing in there now. It's unbelievable. The sound attenuation is amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
It's a sound protection as well.
The sound, and of course it will be for thermal as well. It's argon filled in. Fabulous.
Yeah.
Yes, it was expensive, but worth every cent.
So as you guys sit in shul on Friday night, Saturday, during the week, meditating, all the other activities on offer, are there things that come to your mind about the building that you want to inhabit, that you would like to see on your building?
I'd like to see new houses not use wood as frames, but have a substitute type of frame. Something that can be made from waste or something that's strong.
Yep.
Is there such thing?
There are. They're not necessarily mainstream as yet, but I have seen some recycled plastic type products hit the market, but they're very early.
Can be nailed and
They're like prototype phase at the moment. They're not mainstream at all. Yeah. But that said, timber sourced from responsible forests is a good thing. Relative to the embodied energy of concrete or steel, it's a good thing.
Want to see more plants indoors?
Yep.
Outdoors?
Right on. Yep.
Outdoor spaces?
Plastic ones.
I was just going to say two things, like more plants or veggies or fruit trees or, living things.
Yep.
And I was also, I don't know if this is kind of what you're looking for, but more dynamic spaces. So like, for example, I'm assuming that the rooms will be bigger, or like the shul space will be bigger, but rather than it being like just a square box, actually thinking about the way that we inhabit the space of Spiritgrow and the like atmosphere and aesthetic that we bring as a congregation, and being able to inhabit that space in the right way rather than putting us into a box.
Yeah, good one.
At the moment, most of the houses and flats have electric hot water systems like 40 liters or so. Most efficient, from my point of view, way is instant electric heating system, which doesn't need to heat constant again and again the water.
Look, in short, I think electric instantaneous is a really great system. Problem is, relative to gas, it's about 7 times more hungry and more CO2 emissions. 7 times, so it's significant. The whole idea is to transition the market away
But
from.
I'm talking about electrical, those hot water supply electrical ones, not even gas ones.
Yes, I know, but that's what I'm saying.
Continuously heating the 40 liters water without use, for example.
Correct. Look, you actually shouldn't be allowed to use those at all. A lot of those are banned for Class 1, so single residences in Victoria. So you shouldn't actually be using them at all. They're hugely energy inefficient. That's just the fact. But I really want to talk to you about this a little bit further because,
If you're dealing with that high-rise building as a developer, how do you make this all work? Because a developer looks at one thing, the old school developers, master of age. They look at where the money is, how much money are we going to make from it? And if the money's not there, they're going to say, this is not, it's terrific, it's a lovely idea, but instead of making $700,000 profit, I'm going to make $300,000 profit. Is that good for me? No. Is it good for the society? Yes. But it comes first.
So my father giving me the hard questions. Of course. Look, I'll just answer that real quickly. So it comes down to the market to demand it. At the end of the day, yes, we'll always have regulation which brings it up slowly through the building code. But at the end of the day, if you've got people, buyers, real buyers coming to real estate agents and saying, what star ratings, what energy rating, what water rating, how is this performing? How much is this building going to cost me to own and operate? That's when we'll really start to see change. Already there are a number of developments. I can think of a handful, but one that really comes to mind is a thing called the Commons, where the model's quite different, it's quite radical. It wasn't really designed to make a huge amount of money for the developer, but it was a model that has got so much success that they're rolling them out one after the other now, where all those ideals about vertical communities have been integrated into these apartments, and you suddenly, it's like one big Melrose place. You suddenly are friends with your neighbours. Instead of everyone being locked away and scared of seeing their neighbours, privacy issues, no one knows their neighbours, secluded. It's crazy. I mean, we live together. We're a community. You should know your neighbours. So that's what they're trying to do, and very successfully. And the market has responded very well to it. So that's what I'd say. I have to answer your question.
My idea is about building movable walls, interior walls. Say families change all the time. You've got one child, then you suddenly got 2, 3, 4. Or vice versa, the family reducing, their kids grow up, they leave, and you don't need those rooms. And walls that could be moved and make whatever the space you want, instead of just having these 3 bedrooms or lounge, dining and kitchen. And if they would have that ability to actually have partitions or walls movable, you can actually create something else, what's needed as the time goes on.
I think that's the most innovative thing I've heard in a very long time.
Even like there are garages for cars. I'm thinking, why do you need a room for a car? Shouldn't there be like walls removable if you've got
we do it with furniture.
One car driver. You don't need so many garages anymore. Those walls should be somehow folded up and made into something else.
We just took our king furniture couch and flipped the whole thing around and inside out, and suddenly it's a brand new couch. So why can't we do that with our houses as well?
Exactly.
Yep.
Walls
Good
should
one.
be able to move.
Yep.
About the use space, sorry, this question.
Yep. No, go for it.
You go.
It should be a bit more accessible. I noticed with the banquet, the doors inside are quite large, but the entrance door is very narrow and heavy, and you have a big step, so the whole area could be accessible.
Yep. Good call. Yep.
Yep. And have you seen the building, Peter McCallum, new building?
Yep.
How it's designed and how you've got all the lights coming from the top.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
It's coming.
A lot of lighting saved, and you don't need electric lights.
I was also going to say, looking at acoustics, so just so that we don't need things like microphones when it's a small amount of people, or in the meditation rooms, and even in shul, just having the architecture, or however it's designed, so that there are spaces where it can be projected more easily.
Okay, good one. Yep. And that's what I'm talking about, modelling. So we can then take the proposed materials and start to analyse how that audio is actually bouncing around the space, and will it be echoey or will it be comfortable? And if it's echoey, what can we put around the room to soften some of that? So those are the tools that we've got at our disposal.
I would say windows that actually open.
Ripper idea, love it.
I think Korean is one of the developments that go on. And 4 years ago, someone wanted to do a development between Porter Street and the Cullen Hotel. A green building like you're talking, no air conditioners, airflow through, whatever. They couldn't sell the project, never happened. Because it's cost prohibitive. It doesn't work.
I can only speak from my experience. Yeah, no, look, I can only speak from my experience where we've delivered, Green Star projects at the same cost. The developer was Jewish. He had a very clear limit on what he was willing to spend. Yeah, so there was no sort of, we need an extra 5-10 mil to get this to to be green, we had a certain amount of money and worked really hard with the design team to get to those outcomes. Yeah? And what it meant was ripping out some of the non-essentials. Do we actually need plasterboard ceilings in the apartments? No, we ripped them out. We had lights coming through the concrete, long string LED strips, all sorts of clever ways you can design your building to get the same, or to get a better outcome for the same money. This sold the whole lot in no time. That particular building, we told the developer he didn't need air conditioning. He was insistent that he wanted air conditioning. I know someone who lives, and I say he didn't need air conditioning because we modelled it, we tested it, we analysed it to the nth degree. We said there might be peak 4, 5, 6 days of the year where you're actually going to need it. Other than that, you don't need air conditioning. I've got a friend who's living in that building now. He's turned his air conditioner on, guess what, 4 or 5 times in a year. So it's all doable. It's just that innovation. It's about changing the mindset about what is normal, and thinking about it a little bit differently to get to the right outcomes. It doesn't have to cost more. It's 95% of it, like I said earlier, is getting the fundamentals right. This is the juicy bit. So, forget about big, bulky plant on the roof. We want to strip all that out and have a roof plastered with solar panels. Yeah? If I can get 30 kilowatts on there, that'd be nice. I prefer 40. Yeah? Now, so just imagine as you drive down Balaclava Road, that's what you're going to see. Not big, bulky air conditioning systems. Batteries. Yeah? Store the power, use them when you actually need the power. Yeah? At the moment, you're not really getting, the right amount for that energy when you put it back to the grid. It's about 11 cents. So, solar panels. Historically, all our shuls have had our eternal lights powered by fossil fuels. Let's build a building where our eternal light is powered by renewable energies. I mean, doesn't that speak for itself? Lighting, smart grids, lighting that responds to the people that are in it. Where are we getting natural light from? So we're exploring all sorts of interesting ideas with a wonderfully talented architect of bringing in light down the sides of the building, through the centre of the building, from the facades of the building, obviously. This is something I'm quite excited about. There's a lot of people who are petrified by it, but until we do the digging and actually work out what's under here, a little bit down the street, we won't actually know whether this is viable. But essentially, it's a ground source heat pump, which means that what you're doing is that, we're in cooling mode. So what you're doing in cooling mode is you're taking the heat from within the building, you're pumping that down into the ground, you're then absorbing or recirculating that fluid back into the building, which has been cooled by the earth. Exact opposite in winter. What you're doing is you're effectively circulating that fluid, you're picking up the heat from within the ground, using a heat pump to make up the difference, and you're heating the space. The efficiencies of these systems are exceptional. Probably about 3-4 times more efficient than a conventional, air conditioning system. The challenge is how far do you have to dig down to get to those temperatures? Now, what we've got here, which we really need to explore, is there's an underground water source Don't know what that is, if it's an aquifer or whether it's just trickle running water. Until we know what that is, we won't know how far we've got to dig, which will really tell us the viability of this geothermal heat pump system. But it's super exciting.
We used to have that years and years ago in Russia, those batteries, and they actually...
Yeah, no, this, yeah. It's, this, yeah, no.
Air pumping out, and no, it's just from underneath. Somewhere it comes out and it's steam, and it's a heavy metal cast iron battery.
I think you might be talking about hydronic heating systems, where it's a similar sort of thing where you've got water or oil in a unit. Yeah, similar sort of thing, except here you're using the ground to absorb some of that heat, and then other technologies, effectively like your fridge, to make up the difference. Yeah. Facade systems, double skin facade systems, you know. So you're essentially re-radiating some of that heat. You can either capture that heat within that space, bring it into the building, or open up to the outside and let that heat flow back out. I'm actually looking at doing something like this for Spiritgrow. From the top floor all the way down, we essentially have light coming right down the middle of your building. It's on the roof. Why can't our rooftops look like this, you know, in part?
They've got now in a lot of buildings the rooftop.
Yep, yep. So where there's an outdoor terrace area, obviously this isn't on top of the PV panels or anything, but PV panels would be that away. So you got your pergola area here. Let's have some, you know, some gardens. You know, there's a kitchen on site. Why don't we use some of the herbs that we produce in the garden? And why don't we use some of those wastes, some of those greens as fertilizers in this garden? Close the loop. Rainwater, capture, reuse on site. Use it for all sorts of things, just depending on the treatment level. This is what I was talking about before. So this is with geothermal, but the same thing applies. If you're digging down and you hit an aquifer, suddenly you got bore water. Hurrah. Ventilation. Hello, let's open a window. So we actually want to design a building where on Yom Kippur, you're sitting next to your father, his breath smells wonderful. And you can actually go and open up a window. Hurrah! You know, so actually looking at cross-flow ventilation through these buildings, looking at the windward and leeward sides, where's the air coming from at certain days and times of the day. It's totally old-fashioned, that stuff. This stuff has been around forever, but we've forgotten how to do it. Air distribution systems. So who wants to sit under an air conditioner and have that hot air pumping into your eyes, and you know, you leave with itchy red sore eyes? There's smarter ways to do it. Timbers, materials. You know, what are we using to build this building? We're actually going to take the time to think about what materials we're using, where we're getting them from, you know, and what's the journey of that material. And more than the journey, what's the end of life of that material? What can we do with it at the end of its useful life? Does it just go straight to landfill? Metering. So the idea is right at reception, there'll obviously be a computer there, I imagine. Why not have the ability to read the data from the building and have real-time readouts of how the building's performing, how much water it's using, how much water you've captured and reused, how much energy you're using, you know, how much you've captured through the PV system, so on. That's what it's all about, guys. It all starts here. And that's it from me. Be the change.
So thank you, Gary. Tonight was really about us just discovering, and what I liked most about tonight was that it actually isn't always about the most cutting-edge technology. It's sometimes about the oldest knowledge that's been forgotten, like many of the older art forms of the world, which are just long gone because they became stale and suddenly the world is poorer because of it. But tonight was also about us hearing what are the things that we want to see in a future Spiritgrow building when it comes to light, air, efficiency of space and other things, so that it's not a place of wastage and it's not a place that actually makes you want to curl up into yourself, but rather something that makes you excited to be alive. There was a really interesting question, of course it came from Gary's father, and that is, but why would we? Why, if you can make $700,000 on something, why would you compromise and make $300,000? And it's actually a really good question. And it comes back to why we've run this program here tonight, because it's not just about a money question. And of course, as a community organisation, we have to ask that money question because it's not our money, if you think about it, that's being spent on this. And therefore, it's got to be done very cleverly and very smartly, so that it's not just money that could be used in some people's opinions better, but actually something that everyone will be proud of how the money's been spent. But we come down to this interesting idea within ourselves, which is a Hebrew word called taiva, which is desire for pleasure. And most things that drive the human is the desire for pleasure. We're constantly seeking it, and when we get it, we feel fulfilled, and then we want to move on and find the next hit. And we do that every day across everything that we do. And when we become aware of that, and we become aware of this desire, we can ask our question, are we desiring hedonistic pleasure, or are we desiring to be a part of something greater, which can also be pleasurable? And so tonight's not just about discovering new ways of building, but it's actually also, did you feel uncomfortable by what Gary was saying? Did you feel excited by what Gary was saying? This isn't so much about whether we're all going to be able to build sustainable, eco-friendly buildings. It's also, are we already pro or against? Because it's going to define whether when we go home tonight, we're going to burn 120 light bulbs in the one room, or are we going to be a little bit more efficient? And this is part of an ongoing series of programs that we are running, so that it's not just about the big buildings that some of us get to walk into and few get to build, but it's also about the way we run our own buildings. There are those in this room who are going to downsize, they're going to renovate, they're going to upsize. And so maybe as a result of tonight, you'll think differently about how you go about it. But most of all, if you think about it, there are 40 people sitting here. And we all have 5 friends, which means if this turns into a conversation with those 5 friends, 40 times 5 is, come on, you did your Kumon, is 200. 40 times 5 is 200. 200 people within the 200 people that we all engage with, there is a developer, there is an investor, and there are people who are building. And when our friends talk about things, they're the ones that influence us most. And social belonging is very important to the society of humanity. And therefore, if we're talking about this, this becomes normal. And when it becomes normal, people's values shift. The need to belong, the need to spend money on the things that bring pleasure, such as the pleasure of belonging. And so we can influence society even if we are not necessarily the actual builders. We as a community are very fortunate because we are going to build something and we're all going to be a part of it. And we'll make our little change. But the change isn't just at 204, 206 Balaclava Road, but it's actually in Bentley and Caulfield and Toorak and Frankston and Brighton and everywhere else that everyone in this room comes from. And that is actually what we're trying to do. So I want to give a big thanks to Gary, and I'd like to actually present Gary with a gift, because not only does he turn up fortnightly to the most exciting meetings, but is actually even more importantly, you've cared to share with the community that you're helping build. So Gary, thank you very, very much. I'd like to thank you for coming tonight, and if you do have any further questions, please do come up to the front and approach Gary. Have a very good night, and if any ideas spark in your mind, you go, oh, should have said that, please email me directly, menachem@spiritgrow.org. Menachem at spiritgrow.org. And if you say, I thought of something that you should have done, or I didn't want to say it because I thought it'd be laughed at, send it to me, because the craziest things have been thought about because someone bothered to raise them at the meeting. So please don't be shy. This is our community centre. This is our community. Thank you.